Hello and welcome to another edition of Petes This Week from the Cogeco TV production studios. Coming up on Saturday, the Petes are going to be facing off against the North Bay Battalion. Last time they played, they picked up a loss. So today we're talking to Clarke Heipel, host of the OHL Tonight, also working in North Bay News up there at Cogeco TV. Clarke, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show, Dan.
So Clarke, what have you seen from the North Bay Battalion? I know they're not having the strongest season.
Well, it's been really hit and miss for the North Bay Battalion this year. The first half was really up and down, and they struggled at home virtually every time out. They were struggling to get points. Now, for this battalion team to have a strong second half, they're going to need to get points in virtually every contest to make this playoff run a success, to make the playoffs, that is. That's because this team is really struggling with injuries. Their back end is fairly thin, and their latest loss was Riley Bruce, captain of the battalion. It's a speculation of an upper body injury, and we don't know how long he might be out. So this team really hit and miss. When they can beat a team, they play well. When they don't, they play fairly poor. So anything can happen when these two teams match up. I really can't predict what might happen this time.
And Stan Butler, last time I had a chance to speak with him, mentioned that at one point in the season they had 8 players out of the lineup, including guys like Cam Dineen, 2 goalies going down at the same time. They had to have an emergency call-up. How much has that impacted the team?
It's been very, very tough for this team to ice a contender because all their best players were injured at one point or another. And for Cam Dineen to be out until playoffs, if this team makes the playoffs, that is a big loss. Now with their captain Riley Bruce, a stalwart on the defensive end, that is a big loss. Matt Warnick, their backup goaltender, was out. Their starting goaltender, Brent Moran, was out as well, both at the same time. So Julian Syme came in and played very well for this team to keep them in it. But they were only averaging 1.5 goals per game over their last dozen until they beat the Barrie Colts in overtime, 3-2 this past Sunday. So it's certainly a bit of a struggle right now, but they're making it work. They're hanging in there. Even though they lost 9 in a row, they're still only about 5 points out of first in the Central thanks to their weak division.
And Stan Butler, he's a notorious coach. Everybody expects the same style from every single team that he coaches no matter where he is. Have they had to change their style at all because of losing so many players?
Yes, very defensive style of play, and that's been the problem because they're lacking defense right now in terms of the numbers. They were icing 4D at one point, and the past game they had 3D at one point until Daniel Walker came back and filled in. So they're really, really thin on the blue line right now, and that's certainly kind of in the face of the battalion defensive style of play, but they're making it work somehow right now. And when these two teams face off, the Petes, who are very high-powered offense, against the battalion, struggling to have numbers, certainly could be an interesting matchup there, Dan. 2
guys still having some success, Phil, are Brett McKenzie and Steve Harland. And then there's a steep drop-off in terms of points on that team in North Bay. Now, those 2 guys, have they just been getting that much more playing time? They're getting thrown out in all situations because they still have pretty good numbers.
Yes, Brett McKenzie certainly playing well, and Steve Harland, the overager, a lightweight, but he's certainly pushing fairly hard in terms of his scoring production. He's been consistent for the battalion. And you say drop-off, there is a considerable drop-off. You have Justin Brazo, and then rookie Adam McMaster really hasn't produced the points that Stan Butler's been wanting, but he came through with that overtime goal this past Sunday against the Barrie Colts, a team they had to beat. If they didn't beat Barrie, it was going to be a big problem. 18th seed team versus 20 seed team. So North Bay succeeded in that test, but yes, they need all-around scoring. They can't just rely on McKenzie and Harlan to score. They look to Brett Hargrave, who's struggled. They're looking to other players to step up and score. So we'll have to wait and see if those players are going to step up and score. Jacob Ball scored on Sunday, too. That's a good sign for the battalion.
And I understand you guys had Stan Butler in your studio for the trade deadline?
Yes.
So they weren't that active. What was his explanation for that?
Well, for this battalion team, they're never in a rebuilding mode because they want to be a competitive team every single year. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, the way you look at it. That was a bit of a contrast between the Barrie Colts and North Bay when they face each other. The Barrie Colts have committed to a rebuild. They only have 1 player as an overage status on that team now. They have committed to that rebuild, whereas the battalion, they're kind of stuck in the middle by choice. They're not selling away the future or selling away the current best players to get the picks for the future. They're just kind of sticking it out, and they believe they have what it takes to make a playoff run. They just have to get there. They can't lose any more players. And when Stan Butler was on the show with Greg Esbrooks, your call-in show, Many people call in asking why were no more moves made, but he stood pat with his decisions. He shipped off Maurizio Colella and got a good player in return in Jesse Saban, and he's been playing well since he's come to the North Bay Battalion.
And they did try and make the one other trade for Stephen Templeton. He didn't report to the team. How did that impact the mood of the people, the fans in North Bay when they found out about that?
Yeah, I think it was a bit frustrating for the fans. The return of Bert Templeton's grandson to North Bay to play. Some people point it might have been too much pressure for him to play in North Bay. But what happened, and the fans just have to forget about it and move on, as they really couldn't do much about that. That's just how it works, and he didn't want to report, and he didn't, so that was his choice.
It's a good way to look at it. Good that they actually grasped that right away, and I know that they love their team in North Bay, but what's the perspective from the outside looking in now on the Peterborough Petes? Always like to ask this to our guests, but what are people saying in North Bay about the Petes?
About the team's possibility for success this year and beyond?
Anything.
Well, I've been pointing to their lack of identity all year long. It seemed like the first dozen games, okay, Battalion are looking for their identity. 24 games in, Battalion looking for the identity. And it's in the new year, halfway point of the season, and there really hasn't been that identity formed. So it's kind of hard for the fans to grab onto something and ride it for the rest of the way down the season when there isn't really much to grab onto in terms of an identity for this team. So it's going to be interesting moving forward for the second half of the season. If they make that playoff push, how successful that will be. The first year in North Bay, it was an amazing year. They made it to the OHL finals. The second year, they made it to the Eastern Conference finals. The third year, they made it to the semifinals. For the fourth year, if the trend follows, they'll get kicked out in the first round. But we'll have to wait and see what the future holds for this team in this year and moving forward.
So there's the North Bay perspective. Now, the North Bay perspective of Peterborough. Sorry, it was what I was trying to get out here there. What are people saying about the Peterborough Petes from up there?
Well, we see what they're doing on those win streaks, and that was coincidentally the time the Battalion were on their losing streak. So I think there's a little bit of jealousy there, seeing the Petes play so well. Jonathan Ang, the last time he was in North Bay, he played very well. What a speedy player. So there's a bit of jealousy there, I think, for the North Bay Battalion. They look at Peterborough Petes, and they're certainly playing quite well in their 61st year in the OHL.
Yeah.
But once they go head-to-head coming up this week, and then later in Hockey Day on the OHL on January 29th, those matchups are really, really fun to watch because both Cogeco TV markets, there's a lot of communication between producers, and it's a fun matchup to have Battalion face off against the Petes.
Absolutely, Clarke. Can you guys do a newscast up there? What's on the news tonight?
On the news tonight, it's Tuesday. That means there's going to be a council recap, and perhaps people in Peterborough know about the Dion Quince, the quintuplets that were born and survived past infancy, the first quintuplets to do so, and it was a highly publicized event. Now the home remains in North Bay. There's two surviving members of the quintuplets who live in Quebec, but the home is in North Bay, and it's pretty expensive. The city can't really afford it, but people are saying, let's keep it. So that's a controversy. The decision comes next Monday.
All right, Clarke, thanks a lot for joining us, and good luck with your work today. It sounds like some interesting stuff.
Thanks, Dan. Have me on anytime. I appreciate your time to have me on.
That was Clarke Heipel, the host of the OHL Tonight, up in North Bay for the Battalion broadcast, also working on North Bay News. Some interesting stories today. We'll head to break now. When we come back, we'll announce the winner of our Caption This contest with Pete Dalliday and Scott Arnold, so stay tuned for that.